Well, all the way, thank you, all the way in Scotland. I'm glad we didn't have to get to the airport to pick him up in time, but he is a long way from the high plains of northern New Mexico, out in Scotland, where they dream about the dryness that we have here. Well, Cahalen Morrison had quite a career in the music scene. Played with a whole bunch of people in the bluegrass contemporary world. Tim O'Brien and Hot Rise, and with his band Western Centuries, and also in a duo with Eli West. And so he is just traveling, and as I assume is having a fine time in Scotland, where they go out when it's raining, and because that's what they love. And anyway, but he's going to do a workshop really on songwriting, and that spark of creativity that drives us all when the inspiration hits us. So welcome to Cahalen. It's good to see you.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here. And I did, for the record, spend about 10 years in Seattle. So I'm okay with the rain and the gray. So I think I'll be all right. I was gonna start by just maybe playing a song or two, just to kind of give everybody an idea of kind of what I do, and things like that. So if that sounds all right, I think I'll just kind of kick into that a little bit. So this is a song, speaking of Scotland, this is a song about, so my great-grandfather came from the Isle of Lewis, out off of the northwest coast, the Outer Hebrides, which are the kind of the northwesternmost islands off of the coast of Scotland. And so when I was up there a handful of years ago, I saw a placard for this place called the Beasts of Home, which I didn't know what it meant, but I wrote it down, because it just was a cool sounding thing. So I wrote it down and started researching it, and it turns out, it's kind of this outcropping of rocks under the sea, in the Stornoway Harbor, which is where the ships would sail in. And this boat that was coming up after the war in 1918, right after the war had finished, the troops were leaving France, and they sent, all the soldiers that made it were headed home to Scotland, and they were on a ship going up, and as they entered the harbor, they hit the rocks, and everyone died. So they survived, the whole war, and then within sight of their home, all the ship crashed into these rocks, and nobody could swim. Nobody knew how to swim, and they were all wearing their military garb and whatnot. So it's pretty lonesome situation to be in. But anyway, I wrote this song about it. It's called "Those Mighty Beasts of Home." In the year 1918, when the war came tumbling down, all the men that were spared were home to Scotland bound. Across the Channel wide to the north she sailed, Oh, a sea of fire couldn't slow her down, nor could the strongest gale. She sailed away from kind of low cost in the last day of the year, filled with all the eager boys. She was Lewis bound to steer. The sails were full on the Isle there as an eagle spreads its wings. Well, they cut across the mentions deep, feeling rich as any king. But as the lights from the harbor came as a beacon in the night, oh, the waves they crashed in the sea, it roared, they saw a dreadful sight. The captain cried out an awful noise, name they've heard before. Then a sound came thundering, like death knocking at your door. Below the waves all but sleeping still, but nowhere did they roam. They'd laid in wait some crooked fate, those mighty beasts of home. As the sea, well, it came rushing in, and the ship was sinking fast. 200 weary sailors swam, they saw their home the last. Their leather boots were like cannonballs, they pulled and tugged them down. And who the war had spared, the sea had claimed them now. In the year 1919, first of days to come, oh, the owl there in the harbor said this war had not been won. The mast it stood out 100 yards like a branch up toward the sky, and the last tree out on Lewis stood tall and said goodbye. All the island mothers walked and combed the windy shore, and the sons washed up one by one in twos and threes and fours. Below the waves, all but sleeping still, but nowhere did they run. They laid in wait some crooked fate, those mighty beasts of home. Oh, they laid in wait some crooked fate, those mighty beasts of home. Questions as anyone has, I'm happy to talk about anything.
Okay.
Well, let's see. It's on the chat, but Taylor Carmen asks about a song, "A Lady Does Not Often Falter," and he's curious about the archaic language, and wants to know if where that language comes from. Is that from reading or another song
or based on an old song.
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah. So it's not based on an old song. It's definitely based on kind of the format of old music and old songs and old poetry and things. Part of it is, which I love the language of old things, and the reason that comes around for me, I do a lot of reading and I like to listen. Like I like to, see words that I don't know what they mean and look them up and use words in interesting ways. I've always found that really fascinating. And then another thing, I think the thing that kind of makes so that song is about a whaler's wife who's left at home. It's kind of from her perspective. It's kind of like a Moby Dick sort of scenario, but about the whaler's wife instead of the whaler himself. And so that is archaic to begin with, certainly as far as subject matter goes. But then the language itself, I really like to rearrange things in a way, instead of saying something like, here comes, the man's coming down the road, you can say, and yon comes a man down the road, or things like that. Just rearranging where the verbs and the nouns and all that are, which I think happened a lot in poetry and songwriting for rhyme schemes, because you can end up getting words that you want at the end. You can rearrange things to make them fit in a way that they wouldn't necessarily if you spoke them in colloquial kind of modern English. So I would say that's kind of where I was coming from in that song. I certainly don't read a lot of 19th century poetry. I've read a bit, but
I was going to say, it sounds like you do. You get those inversions of the sentence, the word order, and it sounds very typical of 150 years ago or so.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I mean, I love it. I do. Yeah. And it's funny how it kind of comes easily if you're kind of thinking in that mind frame. If you're writing in that sort of style already, it seems to flow pretty easily for me anyway. And I'm not using necessarily archaic language itself, but like you say, just kind of the word ordering.
No.
Is like that sets such a flavor and such a tone that you can get away with a lot doing that.
It's a brilliant song. It's so beautiful.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions right at the moment?
Does she drown? It sounds like she drowns. I don't want to hog the conversation here, but I'm so curious.
Does she drown?
Her apron,
the
shape changes with the water. I thought
Oh yeah. Right. I haven't played this song in a very long time. So she swims out to the boat, but I don't think she drowns. I think she swims out just fine.
I'm glad I got to ask you that. Thanks. Right. I'm relieved. Yeah. I'm relieved for her. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, she's the icon in that song.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. If there's no other questions right at the moment, maybe I'll play a banjo song for you, just for fun, to show you kind of the song I just played. Is definitely very story driven, which is not my standard kind of approach to things. I tend to be a bit more poetic, and I like to let the listener do a lot of the work, because that's the kind of music that I like to listen to as well. And songs that really intrigue me and kind of pique my interest are generally ones where I'm not really sure what's going on or what it means, but it sounds enticing in a way by using cool language or some kind of cool structure or just like an interesting theme with a lot left to be desired. I really enjoy kind of needing to read in between the lines and kind of figure out for myself what it's about. which in turn, it feels to me like that kind of allows it to be more open to interpretation, and it can kind of be about whatever you need it to be about for yourself. And I definitely, have folks come up to me and say that, that, oh, this, song means a lot to me because it's about X or it's about Y or Z or whatever. And it's certainly not always about those things that people think they are, but it's because they're putting themselves into the song and inserting their own experiences and their own kind of emotions into this kind of broader framework and a more open structure, which is what I really enjoy about songs as well. So I try to do that. So anyway, that last song was a very story-driven song. It's about a specific thing, and I tried to kind of go from point A to point B, which I do not always do. And I'll play a song now that does not do that in any way. And the name of that song, Sarina just asked, it's called "Those Mighty Beasts of Home." All right, this one's called "My Girl's Heavy." I'm gonna get in the right tuning first. All those your footprints I'm following around. My head's up in the clouds, but my feet are on the ground. Feet are on the ground. I'm down and out in London, I'm down and out in Spain, and every time I head on out, I come straight back again. Come straight back again. Oh, my girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night. My girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night. All those your footprints I'm following around, coming from the country and I'm headed into town. I'm headed into town. And when the winds get blowing, I pull down on my cap. I'm gone straight to the gutter for to take a little nap. Take a little nap. Oh, my girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night. Oh, my girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night. All those your footprints I'm following around, I trace them way up country and they turn me upside down. They turn me upside down. And when my girl gets heavy, I start to float away. And when I kiss that pretty little girl, I'll live another day. I'll live another day. Oh, my girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night. Oh, my girl's heavy, hold on tight, said my girl's heavy, sleeping through the night.
Are those your footprints I'm following around? I'm pointing toward the north, but I'm headed for the south. Headed for the south. I travel through the day and I'm sleeping through the night. And you may see me now, but I'll soon be out of sight. Soon be out of sight. Oh, my girl said, hey, hold on tight. Said my girl said, hey, sleeping through the night. Oh, my girl said, hey, hold on tight. Said my girl said, hey, sleeping through the night. Thank you so much. It's really funny seeing a bunch of silent clappers, I have to say. Yeah, so that's that tune. It's called My Girl's Heavy, and it's definitely a little more. I would be willing to bet that no one who listened to that could tell me what it was about in any way. You're welcome to guess if you'd like as well, but yeah, and so that kind of thing, by using a lot of like, none of that language was very archaic. Just leading with, are those your footprints I'm following around, and then kind of coming up with all these, different kind of scenarios and filling in these kind of different gaps of putting you in different places. At one point, it talks about London and Spain, and then the north and the south, and up in the air and down on the ground, and love and all those things, and it kind of opens it up to be able to be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And a lot of people have been in situations that they could associate with a lot of the language that's being used in that song. So yeah, that's kind of true. Taylor says, "Been to London, been to Spain" is a phrase from traditional songs. I'm a big fan of, I'm going to call it borrowing from other songs and poems and literature and the whole kind of thing. Since I play, traditional music in a sense. I play a lot of kind of old time music and bluegrass music and things like that. And there's this canon of tunes and songs and whatnot that exist, that you can find, like that lyric, for instance, London and Spain. You can find that in many different things. You can find it in Dickens. You can find it in Handsome Molly, as stated. You can find it a lot of places, and that's, if you listen to like Doc Watson, he has a lot of original songs that either the melody or the lyrics are from a different song, some traditional song or whatever. So there's been a long history. Maybe this is just me getting myself off the hook for ripping people off, but there's been a long history of, borrowing certain things, because that also kind of creates this context for, putting you in this canon in a way, and not inserting yourself into it necessarily, but associating yourself with it, and that kind of gives a certain context to these songs, because it makes you think of, like, Handsome Molly, for instance, or anything like that. You hear a certain line, you're like, oh, that's going to be, if I put, who's going to shoe your pretty little foot in there, I could have done that too, and that would, refer to, I can think of probably like 5 different old time songs with that line in it, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff, just can really be used to kind of associate yourself with things that you're kind of borrowing from or building upon or breaking down or whatever it may be. So I utilize those kinds of things pretty regularly. And it's certainly also a fine line, as far as, what is the line of borrowing versus just stealing. And it's a fine line to walk, certainly, and there have been lines that I've scrapped in songs, that have been too close to something else or associating themselves with something that I wasn't meaning to do or whatever. So just kind of like trying to, be aware of those things and kind of walk that line as closely as you can, because there's a lot of weight behind certain things that if you want to use them, it can create a lot of weight in your song because it'll mean something to people because they've heard it before. Like a lot people love music that they know. It's I would say it's a lot more rare to hear a brand new song that doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard. And all of a sudden be like, that is my song. I love that song. It's mostly familiarity that really strikes chords in people as far as music goes, especially in this kind of genre. If we're talking about Charlie Parker or something, that's a different thing. That's getting blown away for different reasons. But within like the folk kind of catalog or under the folk umbrella, it just really feels like the familiarity is what really draws people in. If you listen to Dylan or John Prine or any of these people, they're familiar melodies and familiar stories and messages and language and the whole thing. So when it comes to writing in this sort of instance, like I'm, part of that world in some sense. And so I just try to kind of utilize the language and the stories and the emotions and all that. I try to utilize what has already been used and use it for myself as well, while kind of, maybe thinly veiling my own stories within that, and that's kind of, to me, like what creates something that will live on in a sense, just because it has that sort of familiarity and colloquial kind of aspect to it. So that's kind of my take on that. But does anybody have any questions or anything at this point? You're welcome to unmute or to type them in or whatever. Yeah, I agree with Lara there. Music is definitely a big mix of all things that surround us. And it is, it can be challenging to kind of come up with something fresh and familiar at the same time. That's kind of the trick, in my opinion, which is difficult, which I'm still trying to figure out as well. But I generally do it using kind of most of those tools I've been talking about with language and story and whatnot. Question: do you usually write songs on a particular instrument? I generally do. I write a lot. I write mostly on guitar, I would say. It's easier for me to kind of sing on top of guitar than anything else, as far as like when I'm coming up with a tune or a song or something. Often it's easiest because it kind of creates like the biggest bed. It's more like writing on a piano, which just kind of has more harmonic options and just kind of a deeper sound. So yeah, I generally write on guitar, but that tune, for instance, I did write on the banjo. It's a very banjo-driven song, and it would be kind of difficult to play on guitar, really. But it's also really fun to, if you do write something on a particular instrument, it's really fun to change it up and try to play that song on a different instrument. And often, just because of the kind of fingerings that you would use on a new instrument or something, can change things really, really drastically and dramatically. So it's fun. I recently played a tune on the guitar for the first time that I wrote on mandolin and sang it, and it had so many more kind of harmonic possibilities, and you can do so many more things chordally speaking on the guitar than the mandolin if you're me. So that's something. Let's see. Does the tune and words usually come first? It totally depends. There are many kind of approaches that I use to writing, and it depends on what I'm doing at the moment. I do a lot of kind of free association writing, where I'll say, and this is a good exercise to do for anybody really. It's a pretty fascinating thing of, if you say, okay, I'm going to write a song about, pick a subject, just like a lumberjack will say. I'm going to write a song about timber or something. And you write tree on your page. And then below that, you just start free associating, kind of as fast as you can, and say, okay, tree, leaves, pine needles, Montana, lumberjacks, rivers, trout, forest fires, railroads, railmen, coal, the Civil War, blah, 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 just on and on and on. And it can go out from that as far as it wants to in any sort of direction. But from that, you have this main theme and this main kind of like artery in the song, and then you have all these offshoots which can, become verses or choruses or whatever you're after. But that's a really good way to come up with kind of an outline for a song, lyrically speaking. And so when I do that, generally I would write lyrics first. But I like to do them both at the same time often as well, as far as like the meter of what you're doing. That can really, they can influence each other, which is a really fun kind of way to write. If you're writing something in some kind of standard like couplets or something like that, some kind of traditional sounding way, if you have your guitar or whatever instrument you play in your hand at the same time, and you're kind of playing some melody or whatever, and you come up and you're like, oh, but there's a line that I want to put, I want to put a line on the end of this couplet or something, and you can kind of have them co-evolve, and you can think about both at once, which is a really fun way to get kind of more intricate like arrangements of tunes, and like it can really break out of just being a really standard song if you let them kind of evolve together and grow at the same time and kind of intertwine. I don't think there should be kind of a direct, you shouldn't just be like, I write lyrics first or I write music first or whatever, and I'll do them separately. If you can combine them at any point, I think it's a really fun way, for me at least, to kind of reach different places that I wouldn't have thought of before. Be it either, you come up with some little fill on the instrument that fits in there, and be like, oh, I can put little words to that, And I have loads of songs that have those kind of little things in them that just have a little. Even the chorus of that song I just played on the banjo, My Girl's Heavy. It doesn't even matter in the song, kind of. The rest of it is just happening. I feel like I'm not there anymore. Got it. So the question is, did the title Fiddlehead Fern come before the rest of the lyrics? It did, yeah. I wrote that tune actually kind of about and on a friend's banjo, which that lyric is Fiddlehead Fern on the back, on the heel. And that's what the part of the banjo that connects to the pot on the neck is called the heel. And her banjo has a fiddlehead fern carved into the heel of her banjo. And I was at her house in Maine, and I was just like sitting on the back porch with her banjo, and it's all, it's just like big, beautiful Norway pines, and like a lot of the imagery kind of from that song was kind of surrounding me at that moment. And so I was goofing around with that tune on the banjo, and then I was holding it at the same time. So I just kind of like, it all kind of came together as one thing, kind of from that. So yeah, it was actually like the very first thing that happened with that song was that exact line. Okay, so how long does it usually take to write a song? That's a tricky one, because I would say it's anywhere from 20 minutes to like 2 years, just depending on what's going on. I do have songs that have taken well over a year of just not working on them constantly, obviously, but working on them a bit here and there, and kind of thinking about them and mulling it over and changing things back and forth and so on and so forth. And sometimes they just kind of all come together real quick, and that a lot of that kind of depends on what like what kind of subject matter you're dealing with. Like the first song that I played, Those Mighty Beasts of Home, that one definitely took a long time to try and get a story to happen in a linear kind of fashion, and get all these kind of facts in there that I wanted to get in, and still try to make it poetic and make it rhyme and so on and so forth. So those kinds of things definitely take me a bit longer. But then there are tunes that are a bit more maybe nonsensical, we'll call it, and don't have to rhyme really well and don't have to be linear, and just okay. Good deal.
Much better.
Much better.
Great.
What did you do?
I don't know. I didn't do anything. I've just been sitting.
Oh, let's
You
roll
did,
with it.
you did a very good job of not doing anything.
Thank you. I've been practicing that for a really long time, I'll have you know.
Now you can write a good song about Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. I probably won't be the first one after this pandemic to write a good song about Zoom. That'd be my guess.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it depends on what I'm writing about. But I wouldn't, don't kick yourself if it's taking you a long time to write something, because some things just take a long time to write. And there was one more question that I missed, and my chat's empty now, and I don't remember what it was.
Oh, I was just wondering if you had any most influential songwriters or musicians that have really,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
your songwriting.
Right. I wouldn't. I have lots, and they definitely change over the years. I definitely, I grew up. My dad was a big Hot Rise fan and Tim O'Brien fan, so I grew up listening to a lot of Tim O'Brien and Hot Rise, and he was definitely a very big influence on me growing up. So he was definitely one. And then I also really got into Kelly Joe Phelps for a good while. He was a favorite songwriter of mine. But then, and that was as a young man, or a young kid really. and then I started kind of going back from there, listening to older and older music. And there's, I mean, there's lots. There's Paul Simon is one of my favorite songwriters. You know, stylistically speaking, it's not at all what I do necessarily, but as far as like, you know, a contemporary American poet, he's basically as good as it gets, really, in my opinion. I also I love Tom Waits. He's an amazing poet as well, and has gone through many a phase, which I really love all of them. So yeah, there's lots of people. I wouldn't say though for songwriting itself, I wouldn't say that I have one influence that's any bigger than any other, really. I was not really drawn to songwriters more than other, like I was more into traditional music and tunes and things more than songwriting. So I kind of got into the songwriting from that angle instead of from the songwriting angle, which is kind of odd, I suppose. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thanks.
I don't see anything else in the chat, unless did the title Fiddlehead Fern? Did you answer that question?
I did, yeah.
Okay, great. Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
And I got the banjo answer. I never would have known that without asking you. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's one of those, that's one of those tunes that no one, you might think you know what it's about, but you really have no idea.
It's beautiful when you don't know, but then you wonder. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad. Cool. So we have 5 minutes or so to go. If nobody has any more questions, or Our Lady of the Tall Trees. That came from I was reading a book called The River Wye by David James Duncan, who's a Northwest author. And it was kind of right after I had moved to the Northwest. He's a great writer. That's a really nice book. The Brothers K is another one of his I would recommend that one first and foremost if anybody's a reader. But the term, I don't remember where the term came from. I don't think I stole that, which is cool. I may have, don't quote me on that, but I think I came up with that. But the kind of the backbone of that song came from, there's a part in that book where he has this whole kind of, one of the characters has this theory that there's a kind of underworld or like a shadow world of, you exist and all the trees exist and the plants and the flowers and everything, but they're shadows that are cast by the sun on the ground. There's this whole like a carrot, for instance, is like a tree, is like growing up out of the ground on the shadow world, and like the roots of the trees are the branches in the shadow world. And so there's this whole like upside down world, which I just started kind of thinking about. And Our Lady of the Tall Trees, I was thinking about, what animals would live in that world, in this world, and so on. And I was thinking of owls because they live in darkness, in a sense. And then I just that kind of came together as, some kind of saintly night creature. This is, I should remember that I have to answer questions about songs I write before I write them, I guess. But so that's where that kind of came from. Do I and fellows in Western Centuries co-write? No, we've actually I've never co-written anything with anyone. In the band, we bring basically finished songs and then work on arrangements and things. But we definitely all have our own kind of methods and ways we go about writing, and then presenting them in different ways to the band to make it, happen with the band. But no, we don't do any co-writing. We all write on our own. Which is fun to, it's fun to have somebody come and just dump a finished song in your lap that then you get to play and kind of mess with the arrangement and harmonies and all that sort of thing.
Cahalen, you can go right on up to, a couple minutes before the next hour, so you'll have time to do at least one song, I'm sure.
Oh, okay.
Sounded
Sure,
like you were
yeah.
headed that direction.
Right. I'll play another song. Maybe I'll play a new song. It's one that I wrote pretty recently. This is called something. This is called The Tears and the Roses. This is a new tune. Some stand there posed with the likeness of God, and some stand there tried with the finest of man. But between the sky and the edge of the sea, well, it's the thin line that led her to me. The clouds, they grow dark, just yearning to burst, shouting long empty threats at the world. But as the faint distant rumblings of war, when she swings her hammer, it strikes to the core. In her heart it did quicken, deep beneath the young cage of her ribs, and all that fell from her sky was the tears and the roses. Think of the deep cold ships on the sea. They suffer through years, for the salt strips them bare. But what if we both came together as one? But to deny how the world's come undone, and her heart it did quicken deep beneath the young cage of her ribs, and all that fell from her sky was the tears and the roses, and her heart it did quicken deep beneath the young cage of her ribs, and all that fell from her sky was the tears and the roses. Thanks so much.
Beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's a new one. Yeah, but I mean, as far as like, you know, advice for people to write songs, I would, you know, kind of one of my biggest things is to not, and this is easier said than done, obviously, but just to not be constrained by form or function or like any of the things that you would be concerned about, because they do kind of matter. They don't really matter. This is a great workshop, I know. You know, just you're allowed to do whatever you want to. You know, if you're writing a song and you want to get an extra line in, but it doesn't fit in the form of your song, make a little part for it to fit. You know, and there's something to be said on the other side of that. You know, there's something to be said for, you know, making a great, you know, line fit in a certain way. You know, the constraints can kind of help you sometimes too. And being poetic, you're like, all right, how can I break this down? I need it to fit in 9 syllables. I have 9 syllables to work with. How can I say this in a poetic way that gets it across and also sounds good? You know, that's a fun thing to work with, you know, just like a limited palette, so to speak. But at the same time, you know, if you do really want to get something in and it's not fitting, you know, you can make it fit. You know, you're driving that ship, so to speak. And you know, I have songs that don't even have the same like chord progression throughout the song, because the melody that I was kind of drawn to because of the way the words were coming out, the melody kind of changed a bit. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the 4 instead of the 5 right here, because the melody kind of wants that, you know. So kind of like listening to your song as kind of an entity on its own, is really good for me, at least, is a really good way to kind of like allow it to become, not to get too like meta on anything, but just to kind of allow it to become what it's going to become, you know, because if you do let it go and kind of follow it instead of trying to crush it into this mold, oftentimes that can lead to really, really fun things. So that would be kind of one of the biggest things I would recommend, is just to like, don't put unnecessary constraints on yourself, and just, you know, go with the flow, for lack of a better term. But yeah, a question, am I going to put out a record of solo or duet? Yes, I'm actually going to put out a record on Friday, a solo record, which I just decided to do today. It's been recorded for over a year, but this whole year happened, and so I didn't put it out. But I'm going to put it out on Bandcamp. So if you just look at my website or any Facebook stuff or any of that of mine, you will see it tomorrow. And the pre-order will be available and all of that stuff. So yeah, it'll be coming out Friday.
Do I throw songs out as part of the process? I don't scrap anything or trash anything. I do recycle a lot though. They always say, to not throw things away. I don't think, anything that you thought was a good idea at some point has some merit to it. It's not necessarily a brilliant idea, or, it might have hit you in the moment as sounding really cool for some reason, and then become less so, as you kind of tried to shape it into something. But I feel like if your mind was kind of interested in it in some way to begin with, it has some, validity, and it carries some weight in you. So like, I always keep things, I'll write really pretty bad songs sometimes, and then, kind of disassemble the lyrics and keep the lyrics, but maybe not in a way that I would sing them the way that I had written that song. And I've reused like tons and tons of lyrics and phrases and words and things like that. I've reused a lot of stuff that I keep a notebook of, of ideas and thoughts and song snippets and things. And, in the midst of writing a song, I kind of scroll through that a lot and look through what I've thought of. And it's amazing how things can, when put in a different context, can mean so wildly different, like have such wildly different meanings. So when I keep this whole notebook full of stuff, and every time I flip through when I'm writing about something totally new and different, like aside from what I wrote this thing down about, or I was thinking of this one thought that, happened, I often will stumble upon it again in this kind of new mindset of writing a new song, and it'll fit so perfectly in a really poetic way. So I would say don't toss things. You can scrap them from your song or from whatever you're working with. I feel like it's more like working with clay than, with doing fine woodwork or something. You can always kind of crush it back down and start again, but you still have the same, clay blob to work with and mold things from.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cahalen. We're out of time. We're going to move on to the open stage now, but I'd encourage anyone who's just joining us, shame on you for not joining us earlier. But anyway, Cahalen is going to be. That's
audience.
Right, shame the audience. It's the only way I can get to him sometimes. But Cahalen's third in a wonderful lineup of live performances starting at 3 p.m.
Well, live stream,
I guess. So hopefully you can catch him later as well. Thank you, Cahalen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah, great.
All right.
All right, that was great. Take care.
Thanks very much. All right, you too.